Welcome to our introductory course on Eternalism, the divine philosophy of the eternal worlds. Unit 30, Emergency Podcast for Parents of Latter-day Saint Youth, Part 5. In Unit 30, we continue this emergency podcast series for parents of Latter-day Saint Youth, diving deeper into the rising storm of artificial superintelligence, social media influencers, and unvetted spiritual impressions, forces capable of overwhelming today's youth. This rising storm underscores President Russell M. Nelson's warning that we will not survive spiritually in the coming days without the constant influence of the Holy Ghost. In this episode, we pick up where we left off, with religion standing alone in the cultural rubble of postmodernism. As I argued in the last emergency podcast, while postmodernism deconstructed morality, reason, and meaning, religion alone emerged mostly unscathed, not because it was stronger, but because it was untouchable. I argued this way: religion survived the postmodern onslaught, not through strength, but through scandal. Its supernatural, faith-based nature placed it beyond reason's reach. Immune to verification and untouched by deconstruction, it endures, not as a testament to truth, but as a testament to the invincibility of the irrational and supernatural. In short, religion didn't win the war of ideas. It evaded it entirely. This evasion lies at the heart of the religious scandal we're exposing. Once belief is granted immunity from verification, every spiritual claim, no matter how wild, demands equal reverence. That's the consequence of a system grounded in the supernatural and ruled by the primacy of consciousness. Truth becomes whatever someone feels it is. And so, when the inevitable questions arise, which God, which church, which witness is true? They're not met with reason or evidence, but with the same unaccountable, scandalous refrain, mine, not yours. The light shining in the darkness of this postmodern madness is not the light of the restored gospel. It's the false light of supernatural premodernism. And with the great apostasy still in full effect, we shouldn't be surprised. As the Apostle Paul warned, marvel not, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. If Satan can pose as divine, it's no surprise that the false religions of the world do the same. This isn't the light of truth breaking through the chaos. It's a false beacon of light, luring millions away from the objective, reality-based foundation of the restored gospel and into the seductive darkness of a supernatural God, counterfeit revelation, and salvation without truth. And this is the scandal, so profound it disguises deception as divinity, trading eternal truth for feelings-driven spiritual theatrics that can neither be verified nor contested. We'll start by exposing the scandal of unvetted, unverifiable spiritual impressions, where subjective feelings replace objective truth, leading to the dangerous absolutism of God, dogmatism, mysticism, and emotionalism. Next, we'll examine the scandal of religious echo chambers and the crisis of conflicting spiritual truth claims, introducing the fallacy of groupthink, the interfaith paradox, and the intrafaith paradox, all rooted in these challenges. In turning to the scandal of unvetted and unverifiable spiritual impressions, we will be revisiting our previous discussion and layout of the root cause of this religious confusion in greater detail. We began with the scandal of many religions and many gods, and the pressing question, which God is the one true God? The typical answer, mine, not yours. But which gods are we talking about? The Jewish God, the Christian God, the Muslim God, and many more. In fact, there are up to 10,000 distinct religions worldwide, each worshiping the God of their faith, each claiming their God as the ultimate standard, the measure of all things. Not just any God, but a supernatural one. This leads to a cascade of religious scandals. Here are 7 obvious ones. 1. Primacy of consciousness scandal. 2. Supernatural nature of God scandal. 3. God is the measure of all things scandal. 4. Immaterial, incomprehensible, and unverifiable scandals. 5. The scandal of 10,000 conflicting and competing supernatural gods. 6. The scandal of 10,000 conflicting and competing religions worldwide. 7. The scandal of mutually exclusive truth claims. These are not isolated problems. They stem from deeper gospel inversion scandals, philosophical reversals of primacy that distort truth and reality. 4 foundational ones are: 1. Primacy of God over reality scandal, absolutism. 2. Primacy of faith over reason scandal, dogmatism. 3. Primacy of revelation over observation scandal, mysticism. 4. Primacy of heart over mind scandal, emotionalism. I repeat the word scandal to underscore the gravity of what is transpiring. These are hard words, but if the full truth of the great apostasy were known, they wouldn't be harsh enough. With that foundation, we now turn from the one true God of Christianity to the next great scandal, the fragmentation of Christianity itself into thousands of denominations. This next scandal asks, which church is the one true church? The common answer? Mine, not yours. But which churches are we referring to? The Catholic Church, the Protestant churches, the LDS Church, or countless others. In fact, there are up to 45,000 Christian denominations worldwide, each claiming to follow the one true God according to their own creeds and doctrines. Rather than revisiting the many scandals this raises, let's now focus on one you may not have considered: the Constantine scandal of rebranding paganism as Christianity. We begin with what may be one of the most consequential turning points in religious history: the Constantine scandal, a rebranding of paganism under the name of Christianity. Constantine, the Roman emperor from 306 to 337 AD, played a pivotal role in reshaping the religious landscape of the empire, merging imperial power with theological authority. Before Constantine the Great, the ancient world was home to thousands of pagan gods, each with their own followers, rituals, and exclusive claims. The result: a chaotic landscape of conflicting and competing deities. These pagan gods were superhuman, not supernatural, powerful beings within the cosmos, not beyond it. They were gods inside the box of the natural world, bound by space, time, and locality. To unify the empire, Constantine crowned the Christian God as the one true God, establishing a single divine authority to replace the many conflicting pagan gods. The Christian God introduced something radically different: a supernatural, transcendent creator, a God outside the box, not just a being within the universe, but the source of all reality itself. But what followed was paradoxical. Despite the claim of one true God, Christianity soon fractured into tens of thousands of denominations, each asserting their own version of that one true God. The result? A chaotic landscape of conflicting and competing faiths. If thousands of pagan gods represented a scandal of religious confusion, then today's 45,000 Christian denominations represent an even deeper scandal: division not among many gods, but among many denominations of the one true God. The pagan gods were never truly destroyed. They were simply baptized into Christianity under one name. The result? One God in theory, but many rebranded gods in practice, producing not unity, but theological confusion and fragmentation. The next scandal asks, which spiritual witness is the one true witness? The instinctive answer: mine, not yours. But whose witness are we talking about? Catholic, Protestant, LDS, or the billions of others? With up to 2.5 billion Christians each claiming a personal, self-validating testimony, mutually contradictory, and deemed incontestable, we're left not with clarity, but chaos. This isn't spiritual harmony, it's divine madness. Conflicting witnesses about which God, which church, and which inner testimony is genuine, and which is counterfeit, with no objective way to verify any of them. If this isn't a scandal, what is? It should stop every believer in their tracks and provoke the question, what on earth is going on here? And no amount of ecumenism, interfaith unity, or interreligious dialogue can dress up this scandal. These gestures of goodwill don't resolve the contradictions. They conceal them, all while ignoring the deeper issue. Unvetted spiritual impressions, grounded not in objective reality, but in the fragile subjectivity of personal feelings and unverified spiritual claims. With every religious group in Christendom claiming the one true God to be mine, not yours, the one true church to be mine, not yours, the one true gospel to be mine, not yours, the one true priesthood to be mine, not yours, and the one true scriptures to be mine, not yours. How long before we confront the obvious? The emperor has no clothes. These contradictory spiritual witness claims aren't just scandalous, they're collectively absurd. It's time to end the religious charade and reclaim our moral, spiritual, and intellectual integrity by finally confronting the one question at the heart of all this confusion. Which spiritual witness, if any, is the true one? And it's time to reject the reflexive, self-justifying answer, mine, not yours, as not only untenable, but morally and intellectually repugnant. Instead, we must confront the deeper forces fueling this collective absurdity, the scandal of religious echo chambers, and the crisis of conflicting spiritual witness claims that keep us trapped in contradiction, and finally do something about it. Let's be clear from the start. No Christian sect, including we Latter-day Saints, is exempt from the scandal of religious echo chambers or the crisis of conflicting spiritual truth claims. As we turn to these echo chambers, the fallacy of groupthink, and the spiritual feedback loop discussed previously, the problem will speak for itself. We'll spend most of our time examining religious echo chambers and the fallacy of groupthink. But first, let's briefly revisit the issue of unvetted spiritual feedback loops from Unit 28, an essential piece of the problem that shouldn't be overlooked. As we covered in previous episodes, the spiritual feedback loop is a feelings-based cycle, starting with feelings-based expectations, leading to feelings-based experiences, and ending with feelings-based confirmations. This unvetted loop fuels the reckless confidence behind the mine, not yours response to conflicting religious claims throughout Christendom. What I'm calling for is simple but urgent. Spiritual impressions must be vetted, not just internally, but externally. Internal validation alone keeps us trapped. I'm not asking anyone to reject their spiritual experiences, but to apply discernment. As the saying goes, trust but verify. This should be a guiding principle and friendly warning, especially for us as Latter-day Saints. We'll discuss how to vet spiritual impressions in more depth later. For now, let's turn to the fallacy of groupthink and the religious echo chambers driving much of this confusion. An echo chamber is often a closed system where beliefs are reinforced, not challenged. Only ideas fitting the dominant view are accepted. Dissent is silenced or ignored. This creates an illusion of consensus and truth when it's really an echo chamber of untested assumptions and mutual affirmation. Living our truth versus living your truth reflects group perspectives that trap us in narrow views. In contrast, living the truth means seeking understanding beyond bias and groupthink. Social, religious, cultural, and political echo chambers too often prioritize loyalty, ideology, and identity over critical thought. To live the truth, we must break free from these closed echo chambers, embracing reality as the standard of truth rather than groupthink. Not all echo chambers begin in error. Some form around genuine truths or shared convictions. Echoing time-tested principles can offer clarity and stability. But even truth-based echo chambers become harmful when they resist scrutiny, silence dissent, value agreement over understanding, or mistake consensus for truth. It's not agreement that makes an echo chamber dangerous. It's the lack of openness. What matters isn't just what's echoed, but whether the echo chamber remains open to challenge, growth, and reality itself. Truth doesn't fear openness, it welcomes it. A truth-seeking community must invite good faith challenges, encourage critical thinking, and stay open to revision. Otherwise, it stops seeking truth and becomes a belief-preserving mechanism, the fallacy of groupthink. The real scandal isn't just that religious echo chambers exist. It's when they become belief-preserving machines, demanding conformity, uniformity, and unanimity through peer, cultural, and ideological pressure. In these closed systems, consensus is mistaken for truth, and questioning is equated with disloyalty, the textbook fallacy of groupthink. Worse still, these echo chambers are often propped up by spiritual feedback loops, self-validating cycles of feelings-based impressions mistaken for divine confirmation. Truth is no longer tested against reality, but simply reinforced by subjective experience. And if this self-assured mindset, mine not yours, runs through Catholicism, Protestantism, and evangelicalism, why assume we Latter-day Saints are immune, especially when every group sees itself as the exception and the critique is meant for someone else? This brings us to what I call the interfaith spiritual witness paradox, a striking example of just how absurd and dangerous these closed echo chambers and spiritual feedback loops have become. Let's turn to that now. As shown here, it's not uncommon for religious leaders, missionaries, or sincere believers to build bridges of understanding across belief systems or simply to share their faith, witness, and testimony with others. But beneath this goodwill and fellowship lies an unspoken tension, the scandal of conflicting spiritual witness claims. Each tradition affirms its own God, gospel, scriptures, priesthood, and spiritual experiences as divinely confirmed and unquestionably true. And though no one says it out loud, the implication for others is clear. I'm sorry you got a different answer, but God just as clearly told me, mine, not yours, was true. What we're witnessing is truly astounding, a spiritual standoff, a deadlock between equally devout truth seekers, each claiming divine validation for mutually exclusive truths. While no one dares say what's become painfully obvious, the emperor has no clothes. In the absence of honest reckoning, these interfaith dialogues risk becoming little more than formalities, preserving civility at the cost of confronting an uncomfortable and inexplicable spiritual reality hiding in plain sight. Until we face this paradox head-on, the scandal of contradictory spiritual truth claims continues unchecked. We go on pretending that one person's spiritual witness is as valid as another's, even when they directly contradict. While both can be false, both cannot be true, and yet we all act as though there is no problem here. We now shift from the interfaith scandal of closed religious echo chambers and conflicting spiritual truth claims to the same unresolved crisis within the intrafaith world, a scandal confronting all Christian denominations, including our own. It's easy to point out echo chambers and spiritual contradictions in Catholic, Protestant, or evangelical circles. But the moment we suggest that the same problems exist within the Latter-day Saint tradition, resistance flares, and that defensiveness reveals the very thing we're naming, a closed echo chamber actively at work. In fact, the Book of Mormon prophet Nephi foresaw this very danger and gave it a name: all is well in Zion. It's this complacent mindset, the belief that we are uniquely immune to error, that defines what I call the all is well in Zion echo chamber. So let's turn inward. Because we stand to gain far more by honestly examining our own religious traditions and blind spots than by exposing the same ones in others. Echo chambers aren't inherently bad. Every religious community echoes shared beliefs and values to preserve identity and cohesion. Again, echoing time-tested principles can offer clarity and stability. But they become dangerous when they close in on themselves, when disagreement is shamed, doubt is silenced, and consensus is mistaken for truth. What matters isn't that beliefs are echoed, but whether they can be challenged. A truth-seeking community must invite good faith challenges, encourage critical thinking, and remain open to correction. Otherwise, it stops seeking truth and becomes a belief-preserving mechanism of conformity, uniformity, and unanimity, where the appearance of unity replaces its reality. In LDS culture, the echo chamber is especially strong. Personal revelation, spiritual promptings, and prophetic authority are often seen as beyond question. When the prophet speaks, the debate is over. This creates a self-validating system that resists scrutiny. Doubt isn't explored, it's heretical. Disagreement isn't dialogue, it's disloyalty. Nephi's warning, all is well in Zion, yea, Zion prospereth, all is well, describes not just complacency, but a spiritually self-assured community, unwilling to question itself, all of which is a perfect description of this LDS echo chamber. This then is the scandal of the LDS echo chamber, mistaking conformity for truth, affirmation for revelation, and feelings for discernment. Sorting all this out within the LDS religious echo chamber, this spiritual feedback loop, and the crisis of conflicting spiritual truth claims is daunting enough. But it becomes even more complex when we consider the wide range of overlapping spiritual terms our members, especially youth, are expected to navigate weekly. Terms like light of Christ, conscience, moral compass, still small voice, Spirit of the Lord, gift of the Holy Ghost, spirit of discernment, personal revelation, spiritual whisperings, spiritual impressions, spiritual promptings, spiritual insights, spiritual witness, spiritual visions, and more are all part of our everyday LDS vocabulary. We're expected to interpret them faithfully and coherently while seeking divine guidance and personal spiritual confirmation through sincere prayer, fasting, and temple worship. Yet all of this occurs within the spiritual feedback loop of feelings-based expectations, feelings-based experiences, and feelings-based confirmations. And if that weren't challenging enough, we must also acknowledge that many of our LDS young adults have been taught, from their youth, to see heartfelt feelings and impressions as divine confirmation, relying solely on emotion without external validation. This is the spiritual environment we send our youth into, and so it should not surprise us when the crisis of conflicting spiritual truth claims emerges not only between faiths, but within our own. One such example is what I call the intra-faith proposal paradox. I've chosen to highlight what I call the intra-faith proposal paradox because it's all too familiar to many of our young adults, especially at BYU Provo, BYU Idaho, and BYU Hawaii. It's the all too common situation where a dating couple on the verge of engagement seeks divine confirmation about marriage, trusting in the importance and eternal weight of the decision. In many cases, this spiritual process plays out as expected. Both individuals pray, fast, and attend the temple. Both feel peace or joy, and both come away declaring, "The Spirit confirmed it. I felt it. That settles it." Whether the shared answer is yes or no, the process seems to work, but not so fast. What happens when two sincere prayers yield two different answers from the same divine source? When one receives a spiritual yes and the other a spiritual no? This is the intra-faith proposal paradox, an uncomfortable and rarely discussed scenario that exposes a double crisis: the crisis of conflicting spiritual witnesses and the personal crisis of the one left confused, heartbroken, and spiritually shaken. Because according to everything they've been taught, this shouldn't happen, and yet it does, regularly. It's easy to dismiss conflicting spiritual confirmations as youthful immaturity or just part of growing up, where one person got it wrong and the other got it right. That's the common fallback. After all, people notice that those who go into the process hoping for a yes almost always come out with a yes, and those secretly wanting a no tend to receive exactly that. The whole process ends up feeling personalized, relativized, and trivialized, shaped more by individual desire than divine will. But when a relationship ends with one person saying, "I'm sorry you got a different answer, but the Spirit just as clearly said no to me," we're no longer dealing with a harmless misunderstanding. We're confronting a spiritual scandal, a collision between two claimed revelations from the same divine source, with no clear way to resolve the contradiction. If we take spiritual experience seriously, this isn't something we can shrug off. It's something we must reckon with. In fact, this kind of spiritual contradiction is not only unsurprising, it's almost inevitable. Our young adults are consistently taught two core messages. First, that they should seek divine guidance and personal spiritual confirmation through sincere prayer, fasting, and temple worship. And second, that heartfelt feelings and emotional impressions, often accompanied by tears, are themselves sufficient proof of divine confirmation, requiring no external validation. Given these conditions, how could we not expect conflicting answers? When two individuals bring personal desires and emotions into a process based almost entirely on subjective feeling. The real scandal isn't that this happens, it's that we continue to shrug it off as inconsequential when it does. This contradiction should be our LDS canary in a coal mine, a clear warning sign that our approach to spiritual promptings, impressions, and confirmations is in urgent need of reevaluation. We began with the interfaith spiritual witness paradox, defined as the scandal of conflicting spiritual witnesses, when devout truth seekers are deadlocked in a spiritual standoff. We then turned to the more personal, intra-faith proposal paradox, defined as the scandal of conflicting spiritual confirmations, when two prayers, two fasts, and two temple visits lead to opposite answers. But the scandal in both cases is the same. What happens when two devout truth seekers, whether interfaith or intrafaith, receive two different answers to the same question from the same divine source? But perhaps the greatest scandal of all would be this, that after witnessing both the interfaith and intrafaith spiritual witness paradoxes, we shrug it all off as if it were inconsequential, someone else's problem, or just part of how it goes. It isn't. These contradictions demand our attention, not our dismissal, and they call not for silence, but for serious reflection, honest dialogue, and faithful reform. So where do we go from here? Let's find out. From the very first of these emergency podcasts, one of the most overlooked yet dangerous outside influences threatening today's youth is what I call unvetted spiritual impressions. Unlike artificial superintelligence or social media superinfluencers, these impressions are believed to come from God Himself, yet the danger lies in how we interpret them. Latter-day Saints, along with much of Christianity, have come to equate these impressions with personal feelings, and we place a reckless confidence in them. That's why I've titled this slide, Trusted Feelings, Dangerous Assumptions, with the subtitle, The Hidden Risk and Reckless Confidence of Unvetted Spiritual Impressions. This isn't theoretical. Ever since President Nelson urged us to double down on divine guidance and the gift of discernment, most saints have doubled down, not on discernment, but on feelings, trusting them blindly as divine. That's the spiritual emergency. And while time may be short, there's still time to rethink, recalibrate, and confront the danger. Consider the following. Imagine how differently we might understand spiritual impressions today if, as children in primary, we had been asked a simple question. Can our feelings always be trusted? That one question could have planted a seed of discernment, challenging the false belief that feelings are infallible guides to truth. It would have opened the door to exploring what feelings are, where they come from, their many forms, and what it really means to trust them. What a powerful foundation that would have been for understanding both ourselves and the world we live in. Now imagine if, as teenagers and young adults, after years of being taught that heartfelt impressions and inner promptings are the voice of the Lord, and while navigating hormones, emotions, and confusion, we had been asked in church, seminary, or youth firesides, what if we're mistaking our feelings for the Spirit? That one question could have disrupted some of our most dangerous assumptions, like, if it feels right, it must be right, or that sincerity equals truth, or that tears mean the Spirit is present. It might have helped us distinguish emotional intensity from spiritual reliability, right when we were most vulnerable to confusing the two. And finally, imagine if we, as adults, had been invited, whether in church or at a fireside, into a candid conversation about trusted feelings, dangerous assumptions, and the hidden risks of unvetted spiritual impressions. Such a discussion could have exposed the dangerous assumption that spiritual experiences are self-authenticating and beyond scrutiny. More importantly, it would have forced us to ask, How do we actually vet a spiritual impression? And what other hidden risks emerge when we don't? Yes, these conversations can be difficult, even uncomfortable, but they're exactly the kind we need if we're ever going to confront the ongoing problem of unvetted spiritual impressions. As we wrap up this episode and prepare for deeper discussions ahead, consider President Russell M. Nelson's counsel on the gift of discernment. Plead with the Lord for the gift of discernment. Then live and work to be worthy to receive that gift, so that when confusing events arise in the world, you will know exactly what is true and what is not. Of all the spiritual gifts, discernment seems to stand at the top, and understandably so. Who wouldn't want the clarity to know exactly what is true and what is not in a world of confusion and chaos? But when we speak of trusted feelings and dangerous assumptions, is there any assumption more dangerous than believing you already possess that gift based solely on your own feelings? This is what I call the paradox of discerning discernment. Let me explain. The paradox of discerning discernment lies in this. You need the Spirit to discern the Spirit. It's been said that the first test of discernment is discerning whether you have it. But if that's true, then how can any spiritual impression be trusted without independent vetting? This is why, throughout these emergency podcasts, I've emphasized spiritual impressions must be tested from outside the loop. They cannot verify themselves from within. In the next episode, we go even deeper. This ends this Unit 30 presentation. Thank you for watching. Join us in Unit 31 as we continue this emergency podcast series for parents of Latter-day Saint youth. We'll dive deeper into the rising storm driven by artificial superintelligence, social media influencers, and unvetted spiritual impressions, forces powerful enough to overwhelm today's youth beyond their ability to cope.